If your church community feels like your second home, your second family, what happens when you start questioning the foundation that it's built on? Welcome back to Answers from Genesis. I'm Jen. I'm here with Alan Bondar, and today we're diving into one of the most powerful tools of religious control, fellowship. It's the feel-good drug at the center of the church experience, and the hardest part to walk away from. But is it actually a benefit or just part of the brainwashing? So we're talking about your book. Alan, tell us a little bit about the book and how this is related.
Yeah, it's called How to Kill God the Easy Way. It's related because we are discussing what is holding us in Christianity. What is the trap? Why are we so wanting to remain in this belief system when there's absolutely no reason to believe? And that's what I do in my book. I help unravel that belief system. And that's what we're doing in this show, Jen. We're just continuing to unravel that belief system step by step.
All right. And you can pick up the book at Amazon. The link is below us. And let's go ahead and set our 30-minute timer. Now, Alan, do you think that people stay in church because they believe in Jesus or because they're addicted to the relationships that they've built around him and around that atmosphere?
Boy, that is a very poignant question. And, Jen, it almost answers itself, honestly. I think you just nailed it by even the question. I don't think Christians have any reason to believe that God or Jesus exists. And by Jesus, maybe a person in history exists. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Who knows? But the Messiah Christian legendary version that died and rose from the dead, that Jesus. There's no reason to believe any of that. And we've already discussed that from the very beginning of this series. And I deal with that in my book quite extensively. At the end of the day, humans crave relationship. We do. We love to have people in our lives that care for us, that we relate to, that have common interests. We like to do things together. That's important. Nobody wants to be alone. Being alone is a horrible feeling. Nobody likes to be alone. So when you have an environment where you have an opportunity to develop friendships over a common interest, that is really wonderful. It's a really wonderful feeling, So I think people stay connected to church, and this is not just a Christian thing. This is probably a religious thing in general, but I can only speak to it from a Christian perspective because I was very much in Christianity. But we provide as Christians this environment through different programs like small groups or ministries, even the Sunday morning worship, and you come and you get to see your friends, you get to hang out, and you all have this common interest. It's Jesus Christ, and whether or not that common interest is real or not doesn't matter. It'd be almost the equivalent of going and hanging out with friends and playing Dungeons and Dragons. You all have this common interest around destroying this villain that was created by the dungeon master, and you all work together and you roll the dice and you have commonality and you're having fun and it just feels good. Whatever this villain is that was created by the dungeon master doesn't exist in reality, but it feels good to beat him together with your friends. So I think by and large, Christians don't really ever think about whether God or the Messiah who died and rose again are real. They just believe it because all these other people believe it too. And you get together and you have fun and it feels good and you're conquering life together. And really, pastors more often than not are just talking about really good ways to live life and giving you positive enforcements and, talking about how if you avoid these negative things, you'll live a better life. I mean, it's really no different than just a motivational speech on how to live a good life. But you throw Jesus into it and you throw God into it, and all of a sudden it's like, man, we have this common thing called Jesus. And so I think at the end of the day, I think fellowship in the church is the brainwashing partner. It's what keeps us connected. It's what makes us feel like God is real because we can't let go of that connectivity that we have.
So this one was a really big, important one for me, like probably the most important. Um, so when I was living in Germany in the military, we had very few churches to choose from. And so we had three. The chapel, which was kind of non-denominational. There was one conservative Baptist church, which was small, and Assemblies of God. So I went to Assemblies of God. It was the place where the people were most friendly. I'd never believed what they believed before, but I went because the people were most friendly. That's why we went. And so we were there for 6 years, and it was normally you're there for 3 years in the military. And it was very common in this particular church for families to stay there longer because of the church. And so this is kind of what happened. We're in Germany. And so every time there's a holiday, you can't just run home to mommy and daddy and go celebrate Mother's Day and Father's Day and Easter and Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and Valentine's and Easter and all of those kind of things. And so this particular church, what they did was we had holidays together. And every holiday we did something special. And some of them were pretty massive. Like Easter, we put on a play for the whole community, like thousands of people would come every year. And and we worked on it for 6 weeks, like every day for 6 weeks, just building up to it. And so the whole church participated in putting on this play. We weren't putting it on for ourselves, we were putting on for everyone else. Well, when you're working together on putting together a play, that's almost like having a job, right? So you get to know these people. You're just there working together every single day, putting on this big massive production, and so you become very, very close. But we had a different event that we would do for every holiday. So like Christmas, for Christmas Eve, we had, trying to think what it was called. I can't remember what they called it, open homes or something, but 6 families would have an open house. And so we spread it out throughout the day. It was 2 hours at each house. And so each person who hosted, they would fix, some kind of food. Everybody had a different theme. And then the whole church would go to all 6 homes during the day. So we spent 12 hours together, going from home to home to home to home to home, eating all day long, fellowshipping, right? And that was our Christmas Eve that we did together. Plus, on whatever the Sunday was around Christmas, we put on another huge production. So every Sunday, we had a potluck, maybe games, and if it was good weather, it would last all day long. So we had church in the morning, we had church in the evening, but in between, from 12 to 6, we would still be together. We'd be eating and playing games and having fun and fellowshipping. We just had hundreds and hundreds of things that we did. And when people left, I'll never forget this. When people left, they wrote letters back to Pastor Rick, and they would say, I miss our family in Heidelberg so much. We cannot find a church in the United States that does the things that you did. Well, no church is going to do that because we had to celebrate holidays together, right? So the level of fellowship that we had there, Alan, was more than what most people had with their own family.
Yeah, I think what ends up happening, because churches a lot of times just have a really good event coordinator as their pastor, and they're just, they understand the human need for community, and they get it so well that they're able to produce these incredible gatherings. And they realize that that's the primary element. Some pastors, such as myself, weren't smart enough to make that connection. And so I spent
You had quite a bit of social things going on there, Alan.
We did, but it wasn't, I didn't make it my priority. I made teaching my priority, and I used I use social events to get people to teaching. You know what I mean? Whereas this guy sounds like, oh, well, I get how this works. Let's just get people fellowshipping. Done. That's the end goal. And like, hello, bada bing, bada boom. That's how it works. If you can get people connecting and that's your ultimate goal, holy crap, of course you're going to grow a church. It's going to be all everybody craves and everybody misses because let's face it, like Ray and I moved into this home, back in October, I think it was. And we still are having a hard time connecting with our neighbors in a deep way. One of our neighbors we're close with, and we try to invite people, and they don't even respond to like, oh, we're busy, whatever. It's like it's hard to connect with people. It's not easy, and I get that sadness that people who leave Christianity feel when they leave. They're like, oh man, it's not that it's impossible. It is possible, and it's totally something we can do, but the church is capitalizing it so much that like I think most of the people that we are neighbors with, they already have a church, so they already have that connection, and the church is already stealing their emotional connection, so to speak. So they're not craving it with their neighbors. They already have it fulfilled. You know what I mean? So they just get it all the time. So there's no need to connect with your neighbor. Who cares about your neighbors? Even though theoretically, as a Christian, you should be saving your neighbors. So you should be putting that effort in, but they're not. So, it's the whole thing's not working. It doesn't make any sense because they don't really have a passion for Jesus. They have a passion for connectivity. It's obvious. We see this. This is the brainwashing partner. That's what I call it in my book, the brainwashing partner. It's why it works. Like if you can get people connecting, you get them feeling like they're a part of something real. Even if they don't live it out in their real lives, they feel like they're a part of something real because all you have to do is make these events amazing, make them feel like they're connected, and say one phrase. This is all about Jesus. Boom, you got them. That's it. Yep. It's all about Jesus. And then everybody feels like this whole thing, the only reason we're connecting is because of Jesus. It's not. It's because you have a great leader who knows how to create events. Like, right? Tell me I'm wrong.
Yep. It was actually his wife who did all that part.
Oh, his wife. Right. Great.
Yep. She was in charge of the events. He did the preaching. So they were a great team. They really were.
Yeah. That's the perfect team. Sounds like it.
So what happens if you get kicked out of a situation like that, Alan?
Well, kicked out or leave, one or the other, then you're in our situation where you're trying to connect with neighbors, and it would be easy if they also didn't have that connectivity, but they do. And so it's like an uphill climb because, unfortunately, like I said, the church has capitalized on our world, and it's very frustrating. This is why I say as theism dies, humanism will rise. Because when the church doesn't have these events anymore, and they are no longer connecting in a way, we're going to have no choice but to connect like this. It'll work. We'll just do it with our neighbors, you know what I mean? But right now, the church is holding on to this that most people who go to church, because let's face it, we're Christianized as a culture, most people don't feel the need to connect with their neighbors as friends. They just don't, because they already have that at church. You know what I mean? Like they already go to small group. They already go to ministries. They already go to church. So connecting with your neighbor is like, it's just a lot of work. And let's face it, going to church is a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. You come home from work, you're tired as hell. You got to go to small group. You're tired as hell. You got to go to ministry practice. Got to go to band practice. Whatever it is. So you're already exhausted. And the thought of getting together with more people during the week is like, you know what I mean? And I get that.
Well, it depends. I mean, for us, we couldn't wait because our events were fun.
Well, yeah, they were fun, which is great. I'm glad they were fun. But I mean, I guess what I'm saying is maybe you didn't have like the guilt that some churches, and I feel like in some ways our church even did unintentionally, of, well, you got to do the 5 purposes. You follow the Rick Warren model, the 5 purposes of the church. You got to be involved in the worship, which you got to be there every Sunday. You got to be involved in ministry, which means you have to give up a night of your week to go serve in some capacity or some way. You got to be in fellowship, which means you got to be in a small group. You got to evangelize, which means you got to show up every Saturday to reach out to the lost. and then you got what was the other one? Which one did I miss? I don't even know. But like, there's another one. So I mean, like the thing is, like your whole week is filled up with just going to things that you're supposed to do, and I mean, somehow it sounds like your pastor's wife made it so that it didn't feel like work, but it just felt like fun.
Right.
Cool.
I think that is a difference. So I've been to a lot of churches in my life, right? And um, and there were two churches that had this deep level of fellowship. And I do think I have been to churches that were like what you're talking about, where they wanted everybody to feel like they had to go to these different things. Well, there's a huge difference about having to do it and wanting to do it, right? And so these two churches, and nobody ever felt like they had to go to anything at all, but people wanted to because it was so much fun. It was FOMO. It was real FOMO, the fear of missing on what in the world is going to happen at this event that I'm going to miss out on
Yeah,
if I don't go.
yeah.
And when I try to think about both of these churches, and I just talked about the one right now, but when I try to think about both of these churches, when we would have these events, um, and I would guess for both of the churches, it was at least, other than this, and other than the all day Sunday potluck, which we had at both churches, we would probably have at least one big thing a week, um, maybe a couple small things. But I don't remember anybody not being there. The only time I remember somebody not being there is if they were in the hospital. And it was because they wanted to. Nobody ever felt like they had to in these particular two churches. But let me tell you the bad part about that, Helen. All right. So this sounds really good, right? And it was. It was fantastic. And they were some of the best years of our family's life. But here's the bad part. When we left Germany, we couldn't find that again. And that's when I realized why everybody kept writing back to Pastor Rick saying, we can't find this kind of a thing again, right? So that was severe depression, basically. It felt like you just lost your whole family. We did. They were more family than my parents, my siblings. They were just more family. And it felt like we lost our family. So that was not good, right? That part. And everybody, because they're military, everybody was going to miss that when they left. But in the second church, where this was the church where we were all homeschoolers, and we had this level of fellowship, completely different things, but people showed up because they wanted to, because the events were fantastic. When I got excommunicated, when our family got excommunicated, it devastated us, absolutely devastated us, because they were our whole community. They were our everything. Everything that we did outside of our family house was with this group of people. And then we got excommunicated wrongly, and suddenly we lost all of our friends overnight. I had one child in high school, one child was 12, and one child was 10. They lost all their friends all at once, overnight, for something that we didn't do, because basically the pastor was sleeping with my daughter's best friend and he had to get me out of the way or I was going to do something about it. That was what we did wrong. So it was absolutely devastating. My kids probably cried for 20 years over that, Alan. This was not just, oh, leave and you can't make friends with your neighbor. This was life destroying level. It absolutely devastated our whole family when we got kicked out. To lose that level of friendship and fellowship and community.
So, did that have any effect on your relationship with Christ?
Oddly enough, no, it did not at that time. It should have been a wake-up call at that time, but it was not.
Uh-huh. Interesting. So, did they connect all of the fellowship that you had to Christ when you guys were a part of the church?
Um,
Because it sounded like earlier you were saying they connected it in Germany like that.
yes. Like we would have baby showers. A baby shower for us would be 8 hours and the whole family would go. So it was massive. But there was a prayer and there was a little message and, that kind of stuff. But it was mostly fellowship time. So it was mostly hanging out with your friends.
like literally, you can bring a bag of chips and some dip to a party and say everybody show up, and it was the same thing.
Yep.
So okay, so the other church in Germany. So I can't speak much to what it's like in Germany. I don't have any expertise in German Christianity, so you may have to speak to this more.
They were American churches. Those were American churches I was talking about.
Okay, but in Germany.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So it still had the same reminiscent idea that you create great events and then you say it's about Jesus.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So as long as that church does not screw you over, then everything's great. Everything's kosher. You have a healthy relationship with Jesus and your compadres in Christ. Got it. Yeah. But you come to the American church and a pastor, I mean, it sounds like you had a kind of a screwed up situation there. You had a pastor who was kind of doing some illicit stuff by non-Christian standards, right? Like just
Yes.
by human standards. So I mean, I can see how that would be a problem.
Yeah, well, the girl was only 15, so it was a big problem.
Yeah, I mean that's a problem in all regards. That has no bearing on the religious aspect at all. He was just doing things that were inappropriate. And sadly, it affected you guys because you actually were a part of a church community, and he tried to hide it, and you were the consequence of that.
And unfortunately, I think the numbers, last time I looked at the numbers, were about 25 pastors a week are caught doing some kind of sexual type sin like that. It's a massive amount. This is not just a one-off thing.
I mean, I don't want to, okay, so I don't know where those numbers stretch into, because there is a vast difference between a pastor and a child having a pedophile relationship and a pastor looking at porn and the church dictating that as something called sin, which isn't a thing.
Right.
But because you're in this organization that claims it is something wrong, that to me, those are vastly different. So I think
my point here is that, and the only reason I bring this part up is that because it's so prevalent among pastors that this gets covered up all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And people like me are the ones who suffer when the pastors try to cover it up. And that's what happens often, very, very often in churches. I know hundreds of stories like that.
Right.
Now, they're not always as extreme as mine, but it does happen a lot. And people lose their whole community because the pastor is covering it up. And the person who is going to tell about it, they're the ones who get kicked out over and over and over. And there's other reasons for people to get kicked out of churches as well. But the point is, they can kick you out. A church can kick you out. You may not even do anything wrong. According to the church, you may not even do anything wrong, but you can get kicked out and lose your whole community, your whole family, your whole system of fellowship overnight.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about applying this to your situation, but what I have observed since childhood, and the way this works is a person, whether it be a lay person or even a pastor under different types of circumstances, for whatever reason, gets removed from the church. They get undergo church discipline or whatever. The reason we're doing this is to preserve the unity of the church. We need to make sure we protect the flock from this type of evil. So it all comes down still to the brainwashing partner. Fellowship is the key to preserving the body of Christ. And when somebody disrupts that, we remove them to make sure we protect it at all costs. Right?
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. So if you're still one of the in ones, get rid of them. We need to protect the body of Christ. We need to preserve us at all costs, preserve the fellowship, because this is about Jesus, right? It's never about Jesus. It's never about Jesus. It's about feeling good. It's about holding on to this community you have. And that person, whoever it may be, is disrupting this. You don't even know why. Doesn't matter why. They're a danger to this, and I love this. And the leadership said they're a disruption, so get rid of them. Oh, thank goodness. and you'll even go about gossiping about them. You don't even know what the hell's going on, but you'll find you'll pretend like you know. But at the end of the day, you're protecting this, right? That's what the church is all about. It's about this community and protecting it at all costs. And anybody that comes in, whether it be for good or bad reasons, that may in any way disrupt it in any way, you get rid of the yeast and you hold on to this, right? That's really what's going on here. And that it's a brainwashing technique. It caters to people's deepest need to be in community. And as long as they feel like they're a part of this community and you keep Jesus as the central idea for this community, you can give them any reason whatsoever to get rid of that person. As long as they still feel like they're in, that's all that matters. I want to read a quote from Alan Carr, from his book, How to Quit Smoking the Easy Way. It's a very powerful quote. And here's what he says. He says, "We all tend to think of ourselves as intelligent human beings making conscious decisions that dictate the path of our lives. But the truth is that most of our behavior and attitudes are determined by our surroundings, upbringing, and by forces of which we are largely unaware. These forces, mostly benign, work at a subconscious level. As children, we absorb enormous amounts of information, good, bad, useful, and utterly worthless, effortlessly and without even being aware that we are learning." Talk about brainwashing partner. Like, holy crap. That is how one of the ways that the church uses to indoctrinate people. It's tough to deal. It's sad. I talk to people actually quite frequently that are in somewhat, some are in a depression, some are just going through anger, some are going through sadness, some are just struggling to understand why, the whole why did this happen? But it all relates to how, why did they trap me so bad? And now I feel guilty for leaving this Christianity, and I know it's wrong. I know it is, but I was so connected, and now I feel empty inside. I see that. I'm getting these, and it's just like, it breaks my heart because it's like, no matter how much I wrote about it in my book, it's still one of the most dreadful things about leaving Christianity. The reason you feel this way is not because you left the cult. It's because the cult brainwashed you to begin with. And it's a very, very sad circumstance that you face yourself with. It breaks my heart to see people dealing with this.
In our group, on Facebook, Ellen, Life After Christianity.
Yeah.
This is probably the number one common type of post that we get is, what do I do now as far as finding friends? How do I meet with other people? I'm so lonely now. So, what do you say to people like that in regard to, what we're talking about with the fellowship of the church in today's episode?
Yeah. So, one, I'll give a piece of, how do I put this? Fight the good fight idea, maybe. To borrow a thing from scripture, and the other, I'll try to give a piece of encouragement. I'll start with a piece of encouragement. The first one is, you aren't alone. Trust me when I tell you, Jen and I also feel that. It's very difficult. It's frustrating. We do a lot of work to try to reach out to people. Most of our friends are now online. We discuss things mostly on the phone or on virtual spaces. So that's sad. And it's very irritating. However, I will tell you, any day of the week, I'd rather have a friendship with Jen than a fake friend in Christ. Any day of the week, because this is genuine. And not just Jen, but many other friends that I have too, that I've reconnected with, that have left Christianity. So I get it. It's not easy to not have that gigantic community, but I'd rather have 2 or 3 genuine friends than that, knowing what we came out of. the fight the good fight idea. I don't know what else to call it because I don't have a better term for it. I probably could come up with one if I spent some time thinking about it or asking ChatGPT, I guess. But it's this. A lot of times, one of the things we need to do is sacrifice for future generations. And if you want your grandkids to have the type of community that you miss without having the idea of an invisible God that doesn't exist be a part of it, the best thing you can do is hold your ground, stand strong, and continue to help theism die. Because I've said it many times, as theism dies, humanism will rise. And so we continue to do this. We will build this community again. I promise you. We just need to detach from the church. And I'll leave it at that since time is out.
And just like with any addiction that you need to quit, once the brainwashing has been removed, you just pick a time and you stop.
Yep. And don't just run away yet. Please subscribe, like, drop a comment here. And if you want to join the fast growing community that we have of ex-Christians on Facebook, it's the Life After Christianity community. Go join it. It's a great group. It's a lot of fun. It's a great place to find community, which is what we were just talking about. I know it's not in person. I get it, but it's still a great place to start. So do that. And by all means, drop Jen a tip in the tip jar. She would really appreciate it. I would appreciate it too on her behalf because she does a lot of work to make these shows happen.
Until next time, question your faith with answers from Genesis.